In a world striving for hyper-efficiency, good living, and community, a critical question arises: can we achieve these aspirations while ensuring the sustainability of our cities? Today, we embark on a journey to uncover the perceptions of Nairobi locals towards green mobility, exploring their willingness to embrace eco-friendly travel. The year 2023 witnessed Africa's first ever climate summit, an event that captured attention in a truly remarkable way. The President of Kenya led the charge by driving a fully electric vehicle motorcade. Now, beyond the dramatic entrance, a powerful message on environmentalism and climate action was delivered. But how familiar is the concept of environmentalism to the people of Kenya? Is it an elite field understood just by a privileged few?
So you're a planner and a manager and an environmentalist at the same time. So you understand the concepts and the importance of green mobility in urban development.
Having that knowledge and being capacitated fully with whatever I'm doing and now turning out to be my career path, then I'm willing to pay for that.
To find out, we took to the streets, engaging diverse voices, urban locals in and around Nairobi, to prop their thoughts on climate change and green mobility. Seeking a deeper understanding, we went to the future custodians of our environment, students from Kenyatta University. Now, does knowledge in the science of climate change influence attitudes and perceptions? The data, backed by video evidence, charts, and pie charts, unveils surprising insights.
I'm a fourth-year student pursuing environmental studies and community development.
A fourth-year student pursuing environmental science.
A student in Kenyatta University.
I'm going to take you through a series of questions that are aimed at gauging your willingness to uptake green mobility.
In our breakdown, we described green mobility as
green mobility is anything that reduces emissions. So if right now you normally drive yourself to work,
one way you can reduce emissions is by taking public transport, right? If you normally take public transport, one way you can reduce emissions is by cycling or walking, because that has no emissions. Kuna hizi electric zenye zitoangi, zenye zimekam. Manduthi pia na basi. Alafu pia kuna baiskeli. Unajua pia baiskeli inaitwa moshi.
Zajita siju EB.
Kuna hizo EB bikes. Acha hata na hizo EB, hata baiskeli ya kawaida inaitwa moshi. Ndio, pia kuna kutembea.
Green mobility seeks minimal environmental impact, aiming for a reduction in air and noise pollution and aligning with global sustainability goals. The Green Mobility Report 2024 provides valuable insights into the current state of human mobility and the efforts being made to make it more sustainable and environmentally friendly. This report also emphasizes the importance of sustainable and smart mobility, as the European Commission has set a goal to reduce transport emissions by 90% by 2050. Our research began by inquiring whether the people of Nairobi understood the concept of green mobility. In our case, the respondents were asked to respond either yes or no to having prior knowledge about green mobility. 98% responded to having heard of campaigns about green mobility. In our survey, we asked,
have you previously heard of campaigns towards walking, cycling, using public transport, using electric/hybrid vehicles, and using green bikes?
Ushaisikia kuhusu campaigns za cycling, walking, kutumia public transport, ama kutumia e-vehicles? Ushaisikia mahali campaigns hizi zinafanyangwa? Ushaisikia hizi campaigns za watu ati tumieni hizi mabasi electric, ama nduthi electric, ama tembeeni, ama mtumieni baiskeli badala ya kupanda hizi magari zenye zinatoanga moshi?
We then probed the attitudes towards urban mobility solutions, carpooling, electric vehicles, bicycles, and matatus. Studies show that perceptions heavily influence behaviors. In Nairobi, the embrace of green mobility is still at crossroads, tied deeply to cultural and social norms.
You are associating butterflies with something wrong.
That's how
Which ancestor? Which ancestor?
If they are going to the south, it means the rains are starting.
Turn back to the matatus. Who uses matatus? The poor people and people who are vulnerable. If I run out of money in the middle of the month, I jump into a matatu. But millions of poor people who have no other means of transportation use matatus.
Different opinions were brought forth with regards to green mobility.
Zingine economy inatulazimisha tupande hizi magari hizi za moshi. Hizi zinatoa moshi. Juu unaweza pata kama hii saa hii inabeba 30. Ukienda ya stima pesa ya chini ni 50.
Basikari bado iko risk. Unaona kama ni kwenda na hii barabara hivi kama na huko Nairobi basikari ziko risk sana.
Ni kama umepitia Dodora na Nitao. Hewa ingine hata ubabiki na
Another thing, physical fitness. As you cycle, your body, your muscles,
You're working
will
them
be
out.
exercised. Yeah.
See how comfortable I felt like they were really comfortable. They are comfortable, right?
There were different concerns brought forth in the views of Nairobi locals towards green mobility. Out of the answers collected, 74.15% were environmental concerns, 7.4% were safety concerns, another 7.4% were health concerns, 6.2% were financial concerns, and 4.9% were concerns of comfort. The respondents were asked to identify the mode of transport they use most frequently from the list: personal car, public transport, bicycle, motorcycle, walking, and others.
Why would you prefer to use the train over any other modes of transport?
Okay, one, the train is faster. Another one, it's also affordable than the matatu.
Yeah, it's
actually,
cheaper, yeah.
it's cheaper than the matatu. And like, actually, someone will think the train is expensive, but actually, it's cheaper than the matatu.
I use public transport, though I'm good at cycling. So I like
nice.
Cycling as well.
Would you still use it to go to work over public transport?
Definitely.
Daily I use the matatus most times.
84% of the respondents responded to using public transport to get to their workplace most frequently. 6% walked, 5% used a motorcycle, 4% used a personal car, while 1% used a bicycle. Using economic valuation, we explored their willingness to adopt these solutions to determine whether the respondents would be willing to take up green mobility. We asked,
Would you be willing to take up green mobility? Would you be willing to pay the amount that you normally pay every time you travel to get to your place every day using green mobility solutions? An example ndo tuelewane. Mimi kwetu ni Wangige, tuko pamoja. Nikitoka kwetu kutoka kwa nyumba mpaka nifike town nalipanga 120, si ndio? Tuko sawa mpaka hapo? Sasa kama ninalipa 120, mtu ataweza niuliza, unaweza kubali kulipa hiyo 120 upande gari haina kelele, iko smooth, haitoi moshi kwa environment? Mimi nitasema kwa sababu mimi ni mtu napenda mazingira, si ndio?
86% of the respondents were willing to use a greener mode of transportation, while 14% were unwilling. The respondents that were willing to take up green mobility said they would take it up if
there is some form of compensation for people, like incentives to encourage people to use this most people would use them.
Affordability. Let this green transport, when they come, they be available. They be affordable rather to even the common wananchi, the lower person in the society.
Kwangu mtaa Dandora kuna electric bus na is very effective. Ni vile ziko chache na watu wanazipenda. Ndo mkoro wa mimi anapendanga hiyo dudi ya kutumia hiyo moto ya kuchajiwa.
Kwa nini?
Haina kelele.
Will I be comfortable? Because using a Uber, of course, I'll pay more, but I'll be comfortable in that vehicle. But when I'm using a public transport, nitakuwa nimefinyanishwa hivi. So if I want to be comfortable, I will go for the one that has a higher price rather than use a public transport.
Those unwilling to take up green mobility had the following complaints.
Hizo station zao zikuwe mingi. Juu unafanya like kai kuna ingine pale polisi and metropolis ziko. But unafaa uende mpaka rege uchajio.
Uchajio basi.
Kubati at least una charge saa kama unyewe ukisikia janjo. Nataka launch hizo system hizo hizi kuwe mingi.
The availability of this means
ya kukaa tutakuwa tunakosana kidogo. Bado niko na time yangu ya kuingia office.
Kitu ni kidogo.
Availability
ziko. Lakini ingekuwa ni manyanga tena sana zimekuja kwetu mingi. Watu wengi wangachana hizi za kawaida.
Willingness to pay. Willingness to pay is a concept in behavioral economics that denotes the maximum amount a person is willing to pay for a product. The concept is used in environmental economics to assign economic value to an environmental product. The value placed on the environmental products depicts how much a person, the said person, values it. In our application of willingness to pay, we started by describing green mobility to the people.
The importance of green mobility is simply to reduce emissions. There's a lot of emissions that comes from transportation when fossil fuels are burnt, which is what normally fuel the engines and the internal combustion engines of most vehicles on our streets today. So how much are you willing to pay for a cleaner environment? How much are you willing to pay for less polluted roads, less polluted urban cities, less polluted everything? That is the question that I am asking today. Nauliza kama value yako kwa hii gari, value yako kwa hii kupunguza hewa chafu kwa mazingira inazidi ile yenye unaweza kubali kulipa zaidi ama kiwango ambacho unalipanga kila siku. Tuko pamoja sasa? Sasa wananiuliza ndio upate hii gari ambayo haichafui hewa, haileti hewa chafu. Number 1, si ndio? Number 2, haina kelele. Unajua kelele ya gari mimi hata siongelee ile muziki, naongelea hiyo kwa sababu kama umeingia kwa hizi gari electric zinakuwa zimenyamaza. Usafiri inaanza na inaenda hiyo jani na hakuna kelele.
Respondents were asked if they were willing to spend 50 shillings more than they do for their travel in order to substitute that for greener means. 55% were willing to spend 50 shillings more, while 45% were adamant.
All right, so let's go to the next question. Would you be willing to pay plus 50 shillings? So let's say you pay 350, so unalipa for so. Would you be willing to pay? Yes. Really? Aren't we the same people wenye nini gari kipanda bei tunaenda na different circle? Is it not us? So answer genuinely.
They were then asked if they would be willing to spend 100 shillings more than they do for their travel in order to substitute that for greener means. 45% were willing to spend 100 shillings more, while 55% were reluctant.
Na nikiongeza 100 ikuwe 220. Umutadili na moshi. Iko na mastarehe. Kama uko nayo utalipa. Watu hapa ni watu wangu.
The numbers increased to 150 shillings more than they do for their travel in order to substitute that for green mobility. 36% were willing to spend 150 shillings more, while 64% were unwilling.
Uwanjani na itakuwa mekuzima lakini mimi naweza lipa juu ya nini italingana na gari yenyewe. Unajua gari yenyewe iko comfortable sana.
Lastly, the respondents were asked if they were willing to spend 200 shillings more than they do for their travel in order to substitute that for greener means. 31% were willing to spend 200 shillings more, while 69% were not willing.
Would you be willing to pay 200 shillings and above more? Let me get that unanimous answer one more time. No.
It will be impossible to pay that 200 shillings. Why? Because I have to struggle with other things. Adding me 200 shillings on top of what I'm paying, it's a constraint to me. Itabidi nimeingia into my pocket more. Itaniumiza.
Watu wangu wa starehe imekuwa mingi ama bado?
Not that 200 and above.
Oh, just
200 and below.
Oh.
There was a consistent decrease in the percentage of people willing to pay an increased amount for greener travel options as the amount increased. This trend suggests that while a moderate number of people were willing to pay a small amount for environmental benefits, the willingness to pay significantly dropped as the cost imposition grew. These observations indicated that most people have a threshold of extra cost they are willing to bear for the sake of environmental benefits, which seemed in this case to be below 100 shillings.
Na tuso hiyo ingine ni chwani.
Uchumi yangu sasa mimi ni oka. Mrudishe tu kidogo chini. Juu itumii mafuta.
So tukipita tuso inakuwa tricky kidogo.
Tuso itakuwa juu sana. Hata 150 tunatoa. Acha ikuwe 100.
As the cost increased from 50 to 200 shillings, the willingness to pay decreased, pointing to a critical price sensitivity that must be considered in planning and implementing such initiatives. Designed by the Yale Program on Climate Change Communications, the Synopsis survey, also known as the 6 Americas Super Short Survey, is a questionnaire designed to categorize individuals into 6 distinct groups based on their views on climate change. The survey consists of just 4 questions that are used to determine an individual's level of concern and understanding about global warming. In partnership with the Yale Program on Climate Change Communication, we designed a segmentation tool that allowed us to categorize our respondents according to the 6 distinct groups based on their views on green mobility and its effects. 4 questions were asked to this regard, and the responses uploaded into the group scoring tool for analysis. The questions were as follows. The first question asked the respondents how important it was for them to live in an environment free from noise and air pollution.
Ni important aje kwako kuishi mahali kuna hewa safi na kuna kelele ya magari. Wewe unaweza penda gari.
Kuna raha nyingi sana.
So kwako ni extremely important.
Bado unatulia, akili mpaka inatulia.
The second question asked the respondents how worried they were about air and noise pollution as a result of the use of non-green mobility solutions.
How worried are you about air pollution and noise pollution yenye inaletangwa na magari za kawaida? Like, are you worried? Inakushtuanga usiku, unafikirianga uko like, kuna kelele mingi, kuna hewa chafu sana.
Ni kweli kuna kelele mingi kwa sababu kelele. I once lived somewhere near the road. And for sure, for you to know that umechelewa job, ungejua na magari vile zina. So I can imagine if vehicles are still moving and they are silent.
So you are somewhat worried, ama you're very worried?
Somewhat worried, but
kidogo ile tu inafaa.
The third question asked the respondents how much they thought air and noise pollution arising from the use of non-green mobility solutions would harm them personally.
Unaweza taka kuishi place kuna hiyo moshi na hiyo kelele, ingekuwa up to you.
Sawa, sasa hivi unajua nasema tu sasa hivi tumefika kwa ile life yetu. Itabaki sasa stress na nini zimekuwa mingi kwa kitu. Unataka tu kaa kwa pale umetulia tu sasa hivi. Sasa hizi stima center zinakuja kumaliza kila kitu sasa.
So unataka tu place imetulia, ni very important kwako. Wewe unatakanga kukaa place kuna miti, kuna hewa safi.
Kama sasa hivi umetulia hapa. Sasa sikia kahewa ni safi.
Wenye kahewa
kana. Kwa sababu pale kwa ile jua. Sasa kwa tofauti.
Siwezi enda hapo hata willingly. So wewe unaona kuna shida imeletwa na hizi magari? Kuna like any problems yenye imeletwa na hizi magari na hiyo moshi?
Sasa kama watu wengi, sasa kama sasa moshi, unajua kama sasa gari ikigurugusha pa tuwezi simama sisi wote.
The last question asked the respondents how much they thought air and noise pollution arising from the use of non-green mobility solutions would harm future generations.
Moshi ikiendelea kwenda kwa hewa kikwanga mingi hivi, unaona ita affect generation yenye inakam ya watoto wetu na watuka
already may affect. Ni ile tu hakuna otherwise.
I think it will affect the people in the future when all of this air consolidates eventually in our atmosphere. Do you think it will affect our kids?
Yeah, it will, because now there are some, like if you look at these places that have experienced what they call a nuclear reactions or whatsoever, if you check the upcoming generation, you see it also affected them.
Yeah.
So now this noise pollution will still affect even the next generation coming if it was not being taken care of.
Based on the responses to these questions and using the Yale program on climate change communications group scoring tool, 79% of the respondents were alarmed, 13% were concerned, 6% were cautious, 2% were doubtful, 0 were dismissive, and 0 were disengaged. The alarmed fully believe in the effects of air and noise pollution brought about by the use of non-green mobility solutions and view it as an urgent and serious threat. The concerned believe in the effects of air and noise pollution brought about by the use of non-green mobility solutions, and they also view it as a significant threat. The cautious are unsure about the effects of air and noise pollution brought about by the use of non-green mobility solutions. The disengaged have very little knowledge about the effects of air and noise pollution brought about by the use of non-green mobility solutions. Hence, their minimal concern on the issue. We didn't register any disengaged persons in our research. The doubtful are skeptical about there being effects of air and noise pollution brought about by the use of non-green mobility solutions. They question whether it's really happening or whether it's not really happening. The dismissive strongly believe that there are no effects of air and noise pollution brought about by the use of non-green mobility solutions. They completely reject all the evidence of this. This section is particularly important as it aids in effective communicating of green mobility matters. Each group presents its own characteristics and will react to green mobility information differently. Categorization would enable an educator to personalize information which would be most suitable in the communication of green mobility education. When it comes to factors that would encourage Nairobi locals towards green mobility, here are some of the factors mentioned by Nairobi locals.
Kitu ya kwanza gari ni safi. Kitu ya pili gari iko haraka. Kitu ya tatu gari ina moshi,
zenye ina kelele, kitu imenyamaza. Hakuna vile utasema ati nini ama ndio tu uko ndani uko comfortable.
First of all, convenience. And again, I don't need to pay for parking.
Yes.
You see here in Nairobi. Another thing, physical fitness.
Yeah.
Another thing, cycling is good because it gives you exploration. You know, as you cycle, you are able to view the environment. Different from being in a matatu. You know, you cannot stop a matatu and tell the driver, I need to view the trees.
The train is faster. The train, it carries more people. Yeah. And it's also affordable.
Of the 100 respondents, 93% had a positive view of green mobility, while 7% had a negative outlook on green mobility. Of the 93% that had a positive view of green mobility, 83 reported to be willing to pay the same amount of money they use on transport daily, for a greener substitute mode of transport, herein represented by their willingness to take up green mobility, while 10 were not willing to take up green mobility. Of the 7% that had a negative outlook on green mobility, 3 were still willing to take up green mobility, while 4% were not willing. In the study of human behavior and its influence on environmental choices, researchers delve into the depths of how perceptions shape our decisions. A compelling example of this is seen in the analysis of green mobility uptake, derived from a meticulously structured contingency table. This table presents a clear division between individuals with a positive outlook towards green mobility and those with a negative perspective. Out of the total of 100 respondents, 93 displayed a positive outlook, with 83 of them actually opting for green mobility solutions. Conversely, among the 7 individuals who viewed green mobility negatively, only 3 chose to adopt it, leaving 4 opposed. The key tool employed here is the concept of conditional probability. This statistical method allows researchers to isolate the effect of having a positive or negative outlook on the actual uptake of green mobility. The formula is displayed as follows. Where represents the probability of adopting green mobility given a positive or negative outlook. By applying this formula, the probability that an individual with a positive outlook on green mobility will adopt such solutions is calculated to be approximately 89.2%. This starkly contrasts with a mere 42.9% for those with a negative outlook adopting green mobility. These numbers are not just figures, but a reflection of the broader narrative of human interaction with sustainable practices. They illustrate that while a positive perception significantly boosts the adoption of environmentally friendly transport, it is not the sole determinant. Other factors such as personal preference, need for entertainment, commuting distances, weather conditions, and the need for comfort and convenience also plays a crucial role. This analysis underscores a vital lesson. Perception is a powerful influencer in the decision-making process for transport options, but it operates within a complex network of other personal and environmental factors. Such insights are invaluable to policymakers, environmental advocates, and communities striving to enhance the uptake of green mobility, marking a step forward in the collective journey towards sustainability.
I have an issue with green mobility because at first you're not telling the people why you are transacting to that, and the other issue is that you're not explaining to them the component in that green mobility, because there is not even the narrative now that is coming on that if you use now the electric vehicle, they may pollute environment for a long time compared now to the other mode of vehicles.
When now I got the knowledge on the environmental pollution and everything, I was like, actually, the train is saving on pollution, unlike the matatus, because now we have many matatus on the road, but the train is one that carries more people, and even if it's emitting some pollution, it is not as much as when we have so many matatus and so many cars on the road.
Oh, that's very, very nice. Do you think if more people knew about the environmental pollutions, they would opt for the train as compared to other methods?
Absolutely. Actually, I think there is a knowledge gap. People don't know the impact of this pollution on the environment, because if they were aware the costs that it brings to us, then they will opt for the safer means of transport.
We direct these conversations to the wrong people, people who already have the knowledge. First, let us focus on those who people don't have the knowledge of things like green mobility, people who live in the rural areas. I mean, they don't even get the time to get in those cars, or even, they don't understand what is this green mobility. So that is the first thing, impacting the people with the education.
When tunaelekea environment tumeendelea tukiharibu, and we don't have any other world yenye tunaweza sema is an escape So whatever we have ndio tunajaribu ku-maintain. Kwa sababu hata hii kitu ni tangu aje inakuanga pale kwa
ozone layer.
Ozone layer. Ozone layer. So unapata na global warming. So unapata vitu mingi zinabadilika kwa sababu ya fossil fuels wenye tunaendelea tukibana. Magari ni mingi sana.
Magari ni mingi sana.
Na hizo ndio zinaharibu.
Na zinaharibu hewa.
Kenya ikuwa usafiri yote ni mahali hakuna moshi. Kitu ya kwanza environment itakuwa safi, hewa itakuwa safi. Ni mradi kwa iendelee.
Unaenda sana. So wewe
kwa zote ni hizo. Ningelipa lakini moja tu.
This country has not yet reached that technology level in which they can really sustain those green mobility vehicles in a large number.
Tuseme za stima ziko best.
As we conclude this journey into the hearts and minds of Nairobi locals, one question remains. Can a shift in perception drive a change in behavior towards green mobility? The answers, as diverse as the city itself, may hold the key to a more sustainable future. This documentary is produced by comprehension in partnership with the Clean Mobility Collective of the Urban Movement Innovation Fund.